here, and she's going to make a quick announcement.
Hi, good evening. I will be interpreting the meeting into Spanish, so if anybody needs interpreting services, please come by so you can grab a device. Hola, buenas noches. Les voy a estar interpretando la reunión en español. Si necesitan servicios de interpretación, pueden pasar a tomar un dispositivo. Gracias.
Good evening. I'd like to call the Modesto City School Board meeting, the regular board meeting of, the 1411th regular meeting to order. In closed session, we gave direction to legal counsel. All right. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Continue standing. We're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we had 2 students scheduled from Beard Elementary, but I think we only have Andrea here tonight. Andrea Reyes is a 5th grader. Andrea leads by example. She is intentional in her actions, always kind and considerate, and excels at everything she puts her mind to. Andrea is an excellent athlete and loves to play soccer, basketball, and dodgeball. Following high school, Andrea plans to attend college and study to become a physical therapist or occupational rehabilitation nurse, helping athletes to overcome an injury. All right, and is Bethany, did she arrive as we were doing that? Is there anyone back there? Mr. Penley, is there anyone back there? Or maybe he's not back there. See? Mr. Peterson, do you see another student that came in? Nope, shaking your head. Thank you. All right, then Andrea, will you lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, I want to read the board policy on public comment. I want to call your attention to the fact that if you wish to address the board during the period for public comment on a subject not on the agenda, you must complete a public presentation request card and submit it to the board president prior to the period for public comment. I have a number of cards already, so please get those to us. Only those who have submitted cards will be called upon to speak, and no cards will be accepted after the period has begun. Every person who wishes to address the board must fill out the card. You'll find the cards in the lobby. The period for public comment is limited to 30 minutes. Time will be allotted equally to the individuals based on the request cards submitted. The maximum for any one speaker is 3 minutes. I want to remind you that if you wish to make a complaint against a specific district employee, you should follow the district's personnel complaint procedure. Copies of that procedure are also available in the lobby, as are agenda copies, which outline the procedures we will observe during the period for public comment. The right to address the board does not exempt the speaker from any potential liability for defamation. The law limits the response of the board members and prohibits the board from taking any formal action. All right, let's go ahead and get to pictures.
Good evening. Well, thank you for being here. And tonight we have some character education recognitions. And first we have presenter Katrina Van Walter Drop. I messed your name up. But we were recognizing Maria Montesio, Jose Garcia, and Andres Ibarra. So tonight, Christina is going to give us a little bit of information about what these 3 wonderful students did.
Good evening. These are wonderful fifth grade students from Kirsten Elementary. They're fabulous Kirsten Panthers, and they are in my advanced string class, and they're fifth graders. And about a month ago, they came into class and said, "Can you teach us Happy Birthday?" And I'm like, "Well, I have my lesson plans, and we have a big concert coming up actually next week." And so I said, "Can I bring it next week?" And they said, "No, we need it today." And I'm like, "Okay." So I wrote it on the board. And actually I said, "Why do you need it today?" "Well, we want to play it for our friend. Her mother passed and they wanted to make her feel better." And I said, "Well, when's her birthday?" "Tomorrow." And I'm like, "Well," okay. So I wrote it on the board and we all learned Happy Birthday. And then they stayed after class and they made a little arrangement. And then we went down to their class and they each played a line of it, and then they played the last line together, and they played Happy Birthday for this little girl. And their class clapped, and they wrote them thank you notes, and they made a little girl feel very special. And I think it's wonderful that we have kind children like this in this world, and we should take example from these kids. So I'm really proud of Maria, Jose, and Andrea. And I'm going to put a plug in. Next week, they'll be playing on Wednesday night at Johansson High School, the District Music Festival. Those are the West Side schools. But you could come Tuesday night or Thursday night. They just won't only be there on Wednesday night. So congratulations, you three. Keep it up.
We have a photo op time. Our next recognee will be Christopher Price for civility, and Lamar Wallace, teacher at Grigori High School, will be doing the presentation. Mr. Wallace.
So I have Chris in my entrepreneurship class and in my Future Business Leaders of America club. And in the last 4 years, I've gotten to know him pretty well. And I in that time period, I really haven't met a student as respectful and mature as Chris. Every morning he comes in, he shakes my hand, and he says good morning. He's always helping others. He's on task. He asks great questions, and when you help him out, it's always a thank you. And throughout this entire time, he's just continued to grow as a leader, put himself in leadership positions, and mentor others. And on top of that, he's been able to maintain a 4.7 weighted GPA. And so he's just been an awesome student, a pleasure to have, and congratulations.
Next, we have Rory Kosha. She's a repeat recognition person. Is she here tonight? Come on up. Those of you who have come over the years have probably seen her come up here before. And Coach Dwayne Brooks for Enoch's Wrestling is going to explain to you why she's here and why she's been here before.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know, Rory is a senior at Enoch's High School. She just completed the season by winning another California State Wrestling title. Nice way to cap off the season. She went undefeated, 23-0, and I think that was the number, yeah. And she finished the final match winning in double overtime, so she's no stranger to drama. So. Same as last year. She's a two-time state champion now. She went undefeated last season, 39-0, so she hasn't lost a match in 2 seasons. She's also our high school's first 4-time state medalist, in addition to being a 2-time state champion. So very nice congratulations to Rory. She's had an amazing high school career, and she recently signed for a full-ride scholarship to go to Campbellsville University in Kentucky. She'll be wrestling there. They just won the national title for women's wrestling. So congratulations, Rory.
really quite an accomplishment. We recognize people on a yearly basis, but that's a high school career recognition right there. So we do wish you the best, Rory, in your future. Recently, the California League of Middle Schools had a Teacher of the Year awards. The board would like to recognize the Modesto City Schools nominees for the California League of Middle Schools Region 6 Educator of the Year Award. The California League of Schools recognizes educators who are excellent educators and make significant efforts to implement effective and elements of educational reform. Tonight, we're going to recognize 4 people. The first 3, we're going to introduce the recognition with their site administrator. You're going to come up. We're going to take a picture. And then we'll have the 4th person come up, and in that case, the principal will read a little bit about the individual. But the first person we have is Cindy Karras, and she'll be joined up here with Principal Jessica Fajardi.
Well done. Good job. Here's your certificate. Thank you.
Yes. And next we have nominee Dawn Pitcock and her principal, Dan Iverson.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Here's your certificate.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
One of my favorite people.
And the third person we'd like to recognize tonight is John Mello, and assistant principal Socorro Hernandez is here from Mark Twain.
Here you go. Good job. Thank you.
Each year, one nominee from Region 6, which includes Amador, Calaveras, San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and Tuolumne counties, is selected to represent Region 6 at the California League of Middle Schools annual conference. And this year, the representative for Region 6 will be Roosevelt Junior High teacher Sean Lish, and Principal David Sanchez will come up and talk a little bit about Mr. Lish. Well done, Sean.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, just congratulations to the other CLMS teachers. They are amazing, amazing teachers. So Roosevelt's candidate for CLMS Teacher of the Year was Sean Lish, and he is also the winner of Region 6, which is just a phenomenal opportunity and great representation of who we are as a district and as a school. A little bit about Sean. He is an SDC, a special day class teacher, though you wouldn't know it by walking into his classroom because he has high expectations for all of his students. It looks like any other class, if not higher, which is just amazing to see. He not only has high expectations for his students academically, he also has very high expectations with regards to their character. In fact, every day, and this is just a tremendous thing, when they leave his class, he says to them, guys, just be good people. Just be good people. And that saying has actually resonated through our whole school. He also teaches a class called Pura Vida, which teaches social skills to students with autism. Really amazing class. They're paired up with another student, a gen ed student who just helps them and guides them. And that whole idea of tolerance and acceptance has just kind of gone through the school like a wildfire. It's an amazing thing. And in that class, he says basically they live by the mantra different, not less. So kids are not less, they are just different. And that's just an amazing thing to see. So more than anything, Sean is just an amazing guy. I strive to be like him in character and in practice. He's just a tremendous representation of Roosevelt, and everything he's done has just made our school and the district so much better. So thank you for everything you do for our kids.
One more time for Sean. Now it's time for our MCS heroes. Unfortunately, Downey teacher Jennifer Lafabre could not attend this evening, but we do have 2 people to recognize tonight. And the first is Anthony Gattuso, and Anthony's a network manager in computer systems, and he was nominated by Roman Lorenzen. Anthony, come on up. And Roman, come on up.
Hey guys, I nominated Anthony as an MCS hero because he's a behind the scenes hero. He works really hard. He keeps the network running. He provides good solutions to big problems that we have, like virus infections and like things that sound scary, but they are scary. And he works really hard. He trains all of us together. He put together a really good team in 4 different sections that work really good at keeping the network up. And he's also really good at dealing with other departments and finding solutions to problems and putting projects together. And he's super smart, and he's a really good manager. He's my personal hero also. And yeah, thank you.
I need to give you this also before I forget. Thank you. Come on up here and get. Great, thank you. One more time for Anthony. And our next MCS hero is Tamara Wharton. She's a staff secretary in GATE, and she's being nominated by Dr. Heather Contreras, Senior Director, Educational Services.
Good evening, everyone. So this weekend, as I was thinking about what I would say tonight, one of the things I thought about is what is our MCS hero and what embodies that. And so I'd like to read to you the Webster's Dictionary version of what a hero is. So that definition is someone who is idealized for courage, outstanding achievement, or noble qualities. Mrs. Horton definitely exemplifies that. Additionally, we have the MCS part of heroes. And in MCS, we have the 3 C's: communication, collaboration, and celebration. And Mrs. Horton definitely embodies that. So since she came on board with GATE, she has had a very steep learning curve. She has been very busy, and she has been fantastic, networking with whoever she needs to get the job done. But in addition to that, one thing that is prevalent through every conversation I have with her is, but what about the students? It's for the students, right? So everything she does, she knows very clearly that it's all about students. So she's been a pleasure to work with. I remember the last time I did an MCS Hero Award, one thing I said was, you know, it's all about having the right person in the right seat of the bus. And that is true of Mrs. Horton. And it's even more interesting that she came to the GATE department from transportation. So we're happy to have her, and she's fantastic.
Let's hear it one more time for all the people that were recognized tonight. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming tonight, and we have such wonderful students and staff. Thank you so much. All right, that takes us on to item B, A6, which is approval of the consent agenda. Is there anyone who has any questions on the consent agenda, or any comments or questions? Seeing none, turn it to the audience for any comments or questions on the consent agenda. All right, I'm not seeing anybody make their way up to the front. Just give the audience a moment to clear. Then back to the board. Are we ready for a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
I'll move approval.
All right, there's been a motion by Trustee Marks and a second by Trustee Jimenez. Good to see you. All right, so then it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the consent agenda, state
Aye.
aye. Then the motion passes unanimously. All right, then it goes to item A7, which is approval of discussion action items. Are there any board members who have any questions or comments regarding the discussion and action, the order of discussion and action items? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on the order of discussion action items? Seeing none, then it's back to the board for a motion for approval of the order of the discussion and action items. So moved by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor state aye and raise your hand. Aye. All those opposed? All right, the motion passes unanimously. This takes us on to the period for public presentations. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards. And the first card is Rudy Valderrama. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. Is Rudy here? Hey, Rudy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herbst.
Good evening to everybody on the board. My name is Rudy Valderrama. I am an employee with the Modesto City Schools Transportation Department, and I've been so since 2005. And I come here grateful to be able to speak to you and to address some of the concerns that I have, but I don't do it with any sense of I really don't want to be here to do this, honestly, because what I see going on in our environment, first and foremost, it has turned into a hostile work environment for one, which I believe to be the systematic creation of our current transportation supervisor. I have an article from the Modesto Bee from May 17, 2015, where the current transportation supervisor, at the time was the CSCA president, had told the Modesto Bee that the transportation workers have filed 11 grievances in the past 11 months. In my history, that is phenomenal. I have never seen that much in one department. I was present during that time, and I do not echo this sentiment. And in raising our concerns that we have raised in this last year since our current transportation supervisor has been in his office, we have had many questions. Questions that I know that cannot be answered here. I know we've been asked to trust the hiring process, but that still leaves us with many questions. And one of those questions is after reading this statement that he has made, it seems there is a double standard now. Because regardless of the number of grievances, one is always too much. And I do believe that there is numerous ones being filed or currently in the process of being filed. Also, it's not just the number of grievances and complaints, but also the severity of them. And I do believe the ones that have been levied against our current supervisor are pretty serious, and I would hope that they be taken as such. Like I said, we were asked to trust the hiring process, but the one questions that we have as a department is really understanding is what kind of vetting process had taken place before the hiring of our current transportation supervisor. One of them was in this situation here, after we had the current transportation supervisor had got this supervisor removed. If I have a question, and so does the department, that a lawsuit was filed because of the actions he had taken in the past. Not only that, he has been removed from other school sites because of the way that he has treated other people. And then now we're willing to throw another we're talking about throwing another $35,000 at this problem by bringing in a third-party mediator or some kind of survey to be taken by an outside source. And to me, that's just another waste of taxpayer dollars on top of a very generous salary that this individual is getting, and knowing that he has been a liability financially to this district in the past, and I will believe that he will be a financial liability going on in the future, considering how our department has felt and all the employees that you see standing behind me. Once again, I thank you for your time, and I appreciate this. Thank you very much.
Laura Northrop.
Good evening to the board and everyone that came out tonight. I agree with Rudy. My gripe is, why would we hire a union president to do transportation when he has no experience and he thinks he's always right? Without going into specifics, we're probably about 70% unhappy at work. And it's hard to be in a pressured environment when, our jobs present plenty of pressure without our boss not understanding how to support us. And so I'm just here to echo what my coworkers, what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling. And enough is enough. I think we need to remove the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Corgett.
Good evening, Board President Newman, trustees, interim Superintendent Rehnquist, and Cabinet. My name is Don Corgett, CSEA Chief Negotiator for Modesto Chapter 007. I have also worked as a mechanic for Modesto City Schools for the past 16 years. I'm speaking to you today to inform you the 10-month-long experiment of current transportation supervisor has failed. Having a transportation supervisor with no transportation experience at all, either as a dispatcher or a bus driver, was a huge mistake. The current atmosphere in transportation department is one of harassment, bullying, mistrust, resulting in a lack of confidence in management. The transportation office has a total of 10 months management experience at current time. Veteran bus drivers with 20+ years of experience have come forward trying to help the managers, only to be met with resistance, doubt, and criticism. Do not forget our history at transportation. Just 2 short years ago, the former transportation supervisor was on paid administrative leave for over a year. At the end of that time, there was a large cash settlement for a severance package to get her to go away. All because of similar mistrust issues that were unable to be resolved. Does Modesto City Schools want to repeat its failed history with the current transportation supervisor who also has trust issues that cannot be resolved? I say cut your losses now on this 10-month-long failing venture. Look for a veteran, experienced school bus transportation supervisor and stop wasting valuable resources and dollars on a lost cause. Thank you very much.
Danny Smith.
Good evening, everybody from Modesto City Schools behind me and to the Board of Modesto City Board here, please. Not much as far as what I have to say. Everybody's pretty much said what I've felt, but I do want to add a few things to this. There's issues with our current supervisor that came into the job with no experience. He came in having a job that he could have came in and asked for advice from the veterans here, and they would have helped him out, and he would have been very successful because the prior supervisor had a lot of problems. He came in as the current the president of the union, and he turned everything around that he had accomplished with the union and tried to take it back away from us. There's been trips that have not been filled by schools that were waiting for buses on Saturdays, that they didn't get a bus, that the parents had to actually take the kids to their event in order for them to play their sporting event, because he does not know how to properly do all of the trips that we have that are assigned to our busing. And he's also has alienated all of his office help to where the fact that he has got one of our current dispatchers on administrative leave because he was afraid that she was going to show him up I'm sure this is the reason. We don't know for a fact what happened to this supervisor, but we do know that we've had problems with routes being filled in the mornings. He's brought in another driver with probably 2 years experience as a driver to become a substitute dispatcher, and we don't understand it. How can you bring, if he was to take this position to know his job, why can't he step in when they put somebody on administrative leave and do her job for her? He cannot do his job for her because he doesn't know her job. Why do we throw money at something that is not there to fix? If he would have wanted help, he would have asked for help, and he's had help in the past. They've actually given him 2 different people to come in and help train him, and it didn't do a bit of good. All he's done is cause more problems, and we've taken it above his head, and that's why we're here tonight, because we want you guys to know that there is a problem in transportation, and we want something done about it, because we're going to lose drivers, and we don't want to lose drivers. Modesto City Schools is a great organization, and we shouldn't have to work under these conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Blake Antle? Blake, come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Blake Yanchel, and I am the sophomore class president at Grigori High School. Before we begin, I would like to give some bit of background to why I'm here. These past few weeks at Grigori have been hectic due to many social media threats that have been transpired due to mass school shooting that occurred in Florida, preventing frightened students to attend school. This is what I like to call a simple solution to a big problem. There is a company called A Fighting Chance Solution that has this invention called the sleeve. What this sleeve is it's a metal sleeve that goes over the hinge of a teacher's door, like that one, without the teacher having to go outside to lock her door. They're $70 each, but if you purchase them in bulk, the prices will vary. It's a small, immediate helping device to protect children and staff. Any time that can be bought until law enforcement arrives is worth every penny. It's in addition to a lockdown drill that once the lockdown drill is in place, the teachers can simply slide it over the hinges and move away from the window, so that if a school shooter were to knock out the window and push in the door to access, they wouldn't be able to because of that sleeve. That sleeve helps with 550 pounds of force on the door, so that if somebody were to pull, there would be no way in. And even if they were to break the glass, there's still no way in because they couldn't reach the sleeve that's magnetically on top. It's safer, easier, and a cheaper alternative. Yes, it may cost money, but the life of a child is priceless. So I'm here today to find ways in order to fund or get support so that the sleeve can be accessible amongst all Modesto City schools so that children aren't afraid to attend what should be a safe place. Thank you.
Blake, before you sit down, if you had some paperwork on that, if you wanted to give it to our superintendent, Mr. Ridquist, if you had any paperwork on it or no?
No, I had a slideshow that I was going to prepare, but I realized that there wasn't anything, so I just pulled it up on my phone.
All right. Well, we have some contact information. Thank you for coming. We love hearing from our students. You were a very articulate speaker and stated your point clearly. Thank you so much. I'm pretty proud of Modesto City Schools. Thank you. All right. That takes us to Stacy Bryant Crosby. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry. Kind of short. So.
In Vermont, there is a high school with 350 students, Montpelier High School, and 18 of them are black. Recently, they raised a Black Lives Matter flag on their school pole in addition to the American flag. The student organizer of the Racial Justice Alliance said, "People choose flags because they want to be represented and want to be seen. We students do not feel like we are represented or seen in our education." Now, it's the first high school in the country to do something like this. The principal said, we can and we must improve our education system to be more culturally competent. His name is Mike McRaith. While this is an awesome display of an attempt to bring racial issues to, or try to lay them at rest, it's not enough to simply raise a flag. We have to raise our standards for our teachers and raise the amount of accountability. That brings me to this account. There's a Modesto High student who started high school in the IB program. Very, very gifted. Her freshman year, she was full IB. Sophomore year, started out full IB and fell ill. Because there was another student who was doing home and hospital who was also in the IB program, the school allowed the student to be able to do home and hospital to continue her education in the IB program. While the student who was already doing home and hospital because of her health issues was able to keep up, this other student, who happens to be an African American student, was allowed to slip through the cracks. After returning to school, because she fell so far behind, she had to drop from the IB program and go into the AVID program. And after a week of returning to school, the counselor called her mother and recommended alternative education options. I don't understand how that can happen when it's something that happens, again, with our students who tend to be problem students, who are at-risk students. So if in the LCAP funding, we want to, it will improve our academic achievement gap, we have goals that target specific groups of people, but no implementations that target those specific groups of people. So how do we close the academic achievement gap when students who are considered at risk because of the color of their skin and who have the ability to test into the IB program can slip through the cracks and be recommended for alternative education? And Modesto City Schools data shows that only 14% of African American students graduate from high school once entering our alternative education programs. Micaiah, can you please stand up? This is the student that was affected. She's the granddaughter of Pastor Crosby. She's the granddaughter of Carl Bryant, who is a longtime community member, coach. Kathy Bryant, who's a 33-year educator in Modesto City Schools. I've been very active with Boys and Girls Club, the Black Student Unions. And if my child, who is accelerated, can be at risk of not graduating from high school when starting with such promise, what's to be said for the rest of our African American students? They're different. They shouldn't be treated less. And when you know better, you should do better. And this should not continue to happen. So I would like to know how this problem is going to be mitigated for my daughter, who still hasn't been able to take her finals from last semester, and how this will never happen to another student again, black, white, or otherwise.
Phil Vallejo.
Good evening to the board. So I teach at Enox High School. I'm the music director in charge of band and orchestra. And I wanted to just come in and say thank you to the board for approving our trip to Carnegie Hall last year in January. We put in for this trip. And this past week we were able to go to Carnegie Hall and visit all parts of New York. I wish you could see the faces through my eyes of the students. As soon as we walked in, we had 20 minutes to ourselves in Carnegie Hall. It's empty. It's just you and your students. And you go to play your first note. And as soon as we started playing our first note, I thought, man, when we release this note, there's just going to be this burst of sound colors that fill this, incredible hall. And so, we released the first note and we just waited about 5 seconds and the eyes just continued to get bigger and bigger. And so without the support of the school board, those students would not have had that experience. And for some of them, I'm positive that there was some life-changing moments for them. I know that I didn't tell many people outside of the students or the teachers at our school about this, but there were 3 bands from California, all from the Central Valley actually, and there was one program that brought 2 bands from Virginia, and there was 1 band from Florida, which happened to be the Stoneman Douglas High School Band. And I didn't know anything about Stoneman Douglas before the tragedy that occurred there. Consequently, they are the best band in all of Florida, and so we were certainly treated to an amazing event with them. But we were looking for ways to show them our support. So the 3 high schools in California, we got together and we had this shirt made for them, and we just wanted to show you what we did because, you know, it reflects well. It's all 3 of our logos. It has the Stoneman Douglas logo, has the cheesy line on the top that says "We band together," and then at the bottom it says California stands with Stoneman. So every student in the Stoneman Douglas program and their parents received one of these shirts from us, which actually came from a donor from Modesto that wanted to remain anonymous. So this is the picture of the ensemble that was able to go. We actually had auditioned as Enochs, but once we got in, I thought, you know, I don't know when the next time other programs will be able to do something, so I opened it up to all the schools in Modesto City School, all the high schools, and we had 6 students from Bayer join us and 1 from Modesto High, and they did a phenomenal job representing the district. So I just wanted to say thank you, and we also have a district concert next Wednesday at Modesto High, 10 to 5, and including Fresno State and the University of Nevada, Reno, and all our bands. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vallejo.
I'll take a moment to thank you because we did far less other than saying yes. And for those that don't know, my daughter was on that trip playing, and my family traveled with them, and I got daily updates. And I believe one day in, I started calling it the trip of a lifetime. And the work and the job you guys did, and the chaperones, and the audible call when the snow hit and the flight changed, and the move to New Jersey, which I believe my update from my wife was you had students that had never seen snow like that. There were so many different aspects of this trip that were phenomenal, and I can't thank you enough because I can assure you my daughters and my wife will be talking about this for 20 or 30 years. And the t-shirt idea was great, and I love the picture, and we've got them at the house. Thank you. We did far less, and your boosters were phenomenal.
Thank you. All right. While the room clears, we're going to just take a quick break, and we'll be right back. this takes us to discussion and action item B1. And this takes us to our student representative to the board report. Good evening.
Good evening. The Inter-High Council has created a Schoology group for our leadership students, activities directors, and our high school principals. The group page contains our meeting agendas and minutes, as well as information regarding MMC Team Handball, the LCAP, and the Tournament of Talent. There's also a folder dedicated to articles dealing with education titled In the News. The same articles our PIO emails us. And I'd like to recognize a few young ladies who will be representing our district at the 75th California Girls State. We have Olivia Cadeneers from Johansson, Grace Sanders from Bayer, Samantha Rich from Davis, Bella Mendez from Downey, Catherine Charles from Grigori, and Margaret Peterson from Modesto High. I can assure you they are all wonderful young ladies and will be making us very proud. Thank you.
Great, good deal. Thank you for that report. All right, and Mr. Burton informed me that there is not a Modesto Teachers Association report, so that takes us to the CSEA report. Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Board President, Interim Superintendent Redquist, board members, and cabinet. I have a hard time coming up and basically looking for anything to celebrate when we have a lot of classified employees that are being affected. I'd like to thank the current classified employees that are still present for coming out and voicing their opinion. I hope soon we'll be able to start settling out a lot of the issues that are going on with one department. I'm spending approximately 90% of my time just dealing with the one department, and it's hard to believe that that much time is being spent on one department when realistically I literally have very little to do across district wide because we're able to collaboratively work to settle out problems. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. All right. This takes us to item B4, public hearing and recommendation to approve Modesto City Schools core values for negotiations, an initial proposal and recommendation to receive California School Employees Association initial proposal for the CSEA MCS collective bargaining agreement for the 2018-2019 year. I'd like to turn this matter over to Mr. Ridquist.
And Mr. Munoz, the chief negotiator, will make the presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening, members of the governing board. My name is Roman Munoz. I'm general counsel and lead negotiator for the board. Pursuant to Government Code Section 3547, the district and CSEA Chapter 007 are required to provide the public with an opportunity to become informed and provide public comment on their respective initial proposals. We ask the board to open a public hearing, accept public comment, and then close the public hearing. We would then ask that the board approve the district's core values for negotiations and initial proposal, and we ask the board to receive CSEA's Chapter 007's initial proposal. If you have any questions, I'd be more than glad to respond to them.
All right, based on your instructions, Mr. Munoz, do I open the public hearing now?
Yes, please.
All right, I'd like to close the Modesto City School Board meeting, regular meeting, and then I'm going to open the public hearing. And so, are there any questions for Mr. Munoz from the board regarding this proposal to receive the proposal and to accept our core values? Any questions from the board? Seeing no lights, let's take it out to the audience. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Seeing none, I'll come back to the board. I'm looking for a motion then and we'll close the public hearing. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the Modesto City core values for negotiations and to an initial proposal and to vote to receive the School Employees Association initial proposal.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Moved by Trustee Walker, seconded by Trustee Grenbow. And all those in favor of the those in favor of it, will you please raise your hand?
Aye.
Aye. All right, then the recommendation to approve the core values and initial proposal has been approved, and the initial proposal from the CSEA has been received. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This takes us on to item B5. And again, I'd like to turn the matter over. It's approval of revisions to Modesto City Schools and California School Employees Association, Chapter 007, Collective Bargaining Agreement, removal of Article 26, Yard Duty Supervisors. And I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Ridquist.
Mr. Munoz will also present this item.
Good evening, members of the governing board. I'm presenting to you revisions to the collective bargaining agreement between the district and CSCA and its Chapter 007 regarding yard duty supervisors. Last year, the legislature approved and the governor signed Assembly Bill 670. Assembly Bill 670 amends Education Code Section 45103 to include part-time playground positions as part of the classified service effective January 1, 2018. The law previously exempted the classified service of a part-time playground employee who was not otherwise employed in a classified position. Because of this change in the law, the district and CSEA met and negotiated those subjects within the scope of bargaining related to yard duty supervisors. At this time, we request the board ratify the revisions to the collective bargaining agreement between the district and CSCA Chapter 007 related to yard duty supervisors. I can answer any questions that you may have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Munoz? Seeing none, then I'll go to the audience to see if there's any questions or comments regarding this matter. Seeing none, we'll come back to the board for a vote. So are we ready to make a motion for approval of the revisions? It's been moved by Trustee Grenbo and seconded by Trustee Lopez. All those in favor signify by raising your hand and saying aye. 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 All right. Then the motion passes unanimously. This takes us on to item B6. Approval of the second interim financial report for the 2017-2018 and positive financial certification. I'd like to turn this matter over to Superintendent Ridquist.
Mr. Zerly will make this presentation.
Good evening, President Newman, members of the board. I'm proud to be here and present our second interim financial report to you. This represents the district's financial position as of January 31st and is due to the County Office of Education, certified to the County Office of Education by March 15th. This will be the last full budget update that we bring to you for 17-18. However, you will continue to receive monthly budget updates that we have to make for the financial system at each board meeting here on out. But this will be the last final one that we have until we bring back our proposed budget for 18-19 and then an estimated actuals report. I just, again, want to point out my appreciation for our Senior Director of Financial Services, Michelle Price, who's responsible for maintaining the budget and putting the information together for the presentation tonight. So we're going to talk about the assumptions for the local control funding formula, not only for this year, but for 18-19 and 19-20 now that the governor has released a budget proposal for next year. We'll talk about our assumptions for expenditures, multi-year projections and fund balance and the criterion standards, which are, again, when you see criterion standards, that's a budget update that we're bringing to you, and it's just pointing out irregularities in our financial system that we have to explain. The first pie chart is our revenue. And as you can see in the bullet, the majority of the funds in the general fund come from the local control funding formula, 81% in our case. And I think that really reflects the true intention of the local control funding formula. So prior to that, it was traditionally, you saw that piece of the pie about 75%. The other 25% were categorical funds received by the district to be spent for intended purposes, with the local control funding formula, the intent is to provide more dollars to the local level, and this pie shows that with 81% of our revenues coming from the local control funding formula. Our revenue assumptions, again, not only for this year but for the future years, because part of this certification is we have to prove we can not only meet our financial obligations for this year, but 2 projection years as well. So here you can see our assumptions for revenue. And looking at 18-19, that's the big change between now and December when we had first interim. I think I had told you at that point in time that we were expecting a different estimate for 18-19 than what we currently had back in December, and this shows it. So 18-19 is a year that the governor is proposing to be 100% funded. So you can see the larger increase in the base increase column than what we're used to and what we expect now that we're fully funded. Going forward in 19-20, we believe and we expect the only increases to be the anticipated cost of living adjustments to the calculation, which would be, in this case, 2.41% and 2.8% in the out years. I will talk a little bit more about that. We have a little bit different information for the out years in a minute when we get there. But here, again, if you go back, you've heard this for a number of years. You've heard our target funding, and then where we were at, and then the gap funding. So you can see here the top line being our target funding. There has been up until 2018-19, even for this year, there is a gap between where the green portion of the graph ends and that blue line is. So starting in 19-20 or 18-19, I'm sorry, we will be fully funded as far as our target calculation goes in relation to the calculator that we use for the local control funding formula. And then this just shows where we're currently at. With our, we do have 2 different calculations we have to perform because we are 2 districts. We're an elementary district and a high school district, and it requires 2 different calculations. And so you can see here where we're at by each grade span, and you can see we are at an 87.62% unduplicated percent at the elementary level. Now, this is not our current numbers. This is a 3-year average. So if you're looking to see if that's exactly what it is, you won't match that to anything on the CDE website. That's a 3-year average it's a rolling average that we use for this calculation. And again, you can see the intent of the local control funding formula was to provide more dollars to the students that were identified as the highest need, which is the unduplicated percentage, and the column for supplemental and concentration. Those are add-ons per student that we receive based on that 87.62%. And then again, this is just the current year calculation, and you can see there's still a gap or difference. So for the elementary, it was just shy of $10 million. Third line from the bottom, we're getting 44.79% of that funded this year, or an additional $4.3 million in the current year, 17-18, for the gap funding. High school is just a little different. Different type of student, different demographics. We're 65.09% of our high school students are unduplicated percentage. And then you can see high school students 9-12, they receive a higher base grant for educating a different grade level of student. And then you can see the supplemental concentration grant. We only receive $451 additional concentration per pupil versus anywhere between $11.91 and $12.95 on the elementary side. So you can see how that percentage makes a large difference depending on what your neighboring district is. It's hard to really compare. You have to know specifics when you're looking at how each district is funded. Just like the elementary, we have to go through this calculation. There was about a $10 million gap difference. And again, 44.9% for this year, we received about an additional $4.5 million, or of the gap, we received $4.5 million. Revenue assumptions that we have for this year, for 17-18, these are minor changes that we've made, incorporated into the budget for this year, and also our projection years. Same sort of a chart for expenditures. for second interim, and salaries and benefits are going to make up the majority of this pie when you are in public education. And for us, it's 78% of our general fund expenditures go to people. And then you can see how the rest of it, other than salaries or benefits, how the rest of it are budgeted to be spent. Expenditure assumptions, you hear this all the time, and we will continue to say this. General fund pension reform increases. You can see just for 16-17 where we were a year ago, where we're at for 17-18, and where we're going for 18-19 and 19-20. So one thing, if we would go back and you looked at the base increases that we had for 18-19, we were projecting about a $10 million base increase, and then for 19-20, it was going down about $5 million and $7 million for 2020-21. And look at these increases over the prior year. So when we look at 18-19 is going to be a good year, and you'll see in the slide coming up why we think that's a good year, because our base increase is outpacing the revenue increase for our pension, just for our pension reform. But for 19-20, if we would go back to an original slide, we're projecting about $5 million in growth just based on the COLA, and right away about $4.5 million of that is being absorbed in costs that are out of our control. So again, you've seen this chart multiple times. It's not going away. There's not going to be any change for this, and it's going to get worse as we become 100% funded, and now we're just looking at minimal increases every year in the 2 to 3% range. A large portion of that is going to be eaten up by that amount above the line. And then the same thing for PERS. You can see how it's going up, and again, we're concerned with how it's going up above the line in the out years. So earlier I was saying that 18-19 is going to be a good year, and you can see how the base funding increase, that's the blue bar for 18-19, it looks really good in comparison to the red bar. And that is only for pension reform increases. But then 19-20, what we expect to receive in cost of living adjustment increases to our funding formula almost goes to the red chart or the pension reform increase for next year. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is potentially some good news on the horizon. The Senate Budget Committee is working on a proposal for next year. For 18-19, there's some one-time money added to the budget. It's about $1 billion. The Senate Budget Committee they're wanting to make that ongoing, and so that would help the 19-20 and future years, because instead of one time and going away in 18-19, the Senate Budget Committee thinks that should be ongoing into the future. And there's also Assembly Bill, I believe it's 2020 or 2028. I don't have it in front of me, but that language is to increase the base grants for every school district. So because the economy is doing well, by all accounts it's doing well, there is a push in Sacramento, now that we're fully funded, to increase the base grants, to provide more base grant fundings, because of that red piece of that red bar are items that are out of our control. That's put on us without any input from the local level. Expenditure assumptions for this year and for next year. We just had a board agenda item for yard duty ed code requirements. So that is now reflected in our budget. Now this is a budget. In our budget, we are projecting that every amount will be fully expended in all sources. That it is a budget. Here we are at the beginning of March, and we're projecting by June 30th we'll have spent our budget amount in most cases. Just keep that in mind as we go through this process. We normally don't spend all of our allocations or all of our budget, but it is a budget. And that first bullet there is in the past, we have accounted for about $12 million of what we call annual budget savings. Those have been taken out of the budget, and so they're not in the current year or projection years. And and that was at a time last year when we were dealing with salary settlements with the bargaining units and looking to identify areas of the budget that where we had it, but we weren't necessarily spending it in those locations. So just want to remind people of that when we're talking about a budget and how we project to spend our dollars. Multi-year projection. In addition to the pension reform increases, we have built-in step and column increases of about 1.5% year over year. Additional salary impact from the mid-year 1% increase. The last one that was effective January 1st, that is now reflected in the multi-year projection. Pension increases in out years. We do remove one-time expenditures, so anything in the current year that we have identified as one-time, it was identified with one-time funds. It's gone in our multi-year projection. Routine, not routing. Routine restricted maintenance contribution returns to 3% minimum. So this was flexibility the governor had given us during implementation of the local control funding formula. It could be less than 3%. It is now in 1920. It's going back to it's required to be 3%. And so that is reflected in our multi-year projection as well. And then you can see addition of governor's proposed one-time mandate funds. These are the dollars that if the Senate Budget Committee has their way, this will not be one time and it will be ongoing for us to receive on an annual basis. Fund balance that we have, and you can see 16-17. If you go down to the second line from the bottom, our unassigned balance, 58.6 million last year. This year we're projecting it to go down to just shy of 46 million. Next year, 32 million, and then $10 million in 1920. So this is, even though 1920 is projected to be at $10 million, this is why we can positively certify our second interim for 17-18 because we meet our financial obligations for not only this year, but the 2 projection years. And this just shows a trend of that analysis. Again, it is a budget. It is a projection. Things are going to change in Sacramento over the next couple of months. Things are going to change as we close the books for this year. So this could fluctuate and look a little different when we actually close the books for 17-18. Our fund balance could go a little higher, but it's a trend. And it's a trend that we've said that we're concerned about once we become fully funded and we're looking at minimal revenue increases year over year with our already built-in cost increases for expenses. What's not included, facility improvements. We'll have that discussion at a special board meeting next week. Future collective bargaining impacts to subsequent years. All we have in subsequent years is our current collective bargaining language. Potential increases in special ed contribution. And then potential changes in enrollment trends. Is this year an anomaly? We reduced our revenue by almost 100 students this year. Overall, we had more loss in elementary. We had some gain in grades 9-12, but it was about 100 student loss in our revenue projection that we have accounted for. As of this point, we're assuming at least that loss of students going forward until we see them come back potentially if they do in 18-19, or what level that the reduction in students may continue on into the future. So that's something we'll be watching as well. But our projections are based on our current year numbers, which were down significantly this year, especially at the elementary district. All districts are facing leaner years. We've talked about that. Again, in the foreseeable future, we're expecting modest growth on our revenue, 1 to 2.5% range. And again, will that amount be sufficient to cover our just normal operational cost increases, step increases, column increases, and pension reform? Criterion standards, this is the actual documents that we submit to the state of California that you're certifying. The point of this is to show anomalies between where we were at in December versus where we're at now. And again, these things pop up automatically by the system as we put our financial data into it. Local control funding formula came up, but again, there's much greater increase now for 18-19 than what we had projected. So we just have to identify why the change. The change is now the governor's proposed gap reduction is going to be 100% versus what we thought it was going to be back in December. And again, changes since first interim. We have to explain why we're making changes is really the point of this. Deficit spending, that was in first interim, and that will be at second interim as well, just because that's in the projection. And then again, the 3% minimum requirement that we're going back to as of 1920. So based on all of that, based on what you have in front of you, again, we were pleased to present a positive certification. There is a large increase in districts across the state of California because of pension reform and other factors that they're qualified. We are not one of those, I'm pleased to say, and we're proud to present a positive certification for you.
Thank you, Mr. Zierli. Are there any questions for him? Mr. Walker.
If I don't ask questions, people ask if I'm not healthy. There was one item on there that I've never seen before, and it was called testing reimbursement. Could you expand on that? Because that's new, or I haven't noticed it before. How about that one?
That's on slide 10.
Maybe. I saw it, I wrote it
That
down,
was
and then I kept
assumptions?
listening.
Help me out with that, Michelle, if you can. Or do you know what that is?
Uh-oh.
We got, sorry, Michelle.
The items that we receive, we don't receive annually, so we don't recognize them as a promise or a guarantee every single year. So we only recognize them when we receive them. And the two that we received were reimbursements for AP and IB testing fees.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board?
I'm coming.
All right.
I guess I'll say and I don't know which slide it was on, it's towards the end on the multi-year projections, where you incorporated the full funding, and we went out, I think the number moved to 3 years out, moved to 10.7 million. Is that the number that used to be 3 million? So we looked out sort of the 3-year bottom line number at one point was 3 million. That number is now moved to 7 or 10.7?
10.7 in that particular slide represents our unassigned balance. So 3%, our required 3% for that year, for 1920, is just shy of 12 million, is 11.9 million. So we have to set that aside. After we do all of our set-asides, we have projected just $10.7 million unassigned is what that means. It's gone from 58.6 million in 16-17.
Yes.
That would be if everything we say happens, if we spend the dollars we say we're going to spend, then that's the unassigned balance at the end of next year.
Which seems like that's gone up $7 million or so from a month or so ago.
It did, and that was because back in December, we had less revenue anticipation
Correct.
for 1920 than what we now have, or I'm sorry, for 1819, which will fall into 1920 than what we now have. So that is correct. You're right.
And so when everything works out and all this fully funding is kicked into place and we're down the road 3 years, the bottom line is it's moved from 3 million to 10.7. And so a lot of it essentially makes your point that it's getting chewed up in committed costs of STRS and PERS.
Correct.
I think the one thing I will be watching, and I think it's probably wise that we all do, is that I appreciate what the Senate and the Assembly is trying to do. What I'm nervous about is anytime they give money out, they come right back behind it and tell you how to use it. And so it looks like we're getting money, but it tends to come with strings because everybody's got a project they want to assign to it. And I think that's what makes me nervous when they say ongoing. And so I'll be watching that.
That's why, and we are part of a coalition to push for any additional funding be added to the base, which allows it to be spent at the local level without those strings attached.
Thank you, because I don't like when they attach strings.
absolutely.
Okay. Trustee Brown?
Yes, I'm curious about this unassigned balance. We've got a healthy number there right now, but it's moving into an unhealthy direction, and beyond 1920 goes into negative territory. What do we do with our unassigned balance right now? Is that money that is in reserve, or what?
Our unassigned balance is essentially reserves. It's could be used for any one-time budget augmentations that were to be brought to the board, but it is a reserve. And when you hear unassigned or any fund balance, in essence, that's our reserve. However, based on our any fund balance, we have to do certain things with it. We're required to set aside dollars. So when you get down to the unassigned, that is our true reserves, what we have available.
Okay, so that's our wiggle room at this point, and we can spend that money for allocations as they arise. But as we look, and you mentioned the term deficit spending, that we're spending that down more than we're being reimbursed to replenish it.
Sure. As your unassigned balance goes down, that means you're spending more than what's coming in.
Yes.
Which puts you in a deficit pattern. And a prolonged deficit pattern will eat away at those reserves to a point where there's none left. So that is something that we would monitor.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind, we've reduced our revenue projection for less students, but we have not done any expenditure assumption reductions yet. That'll come during budget development. I mean, we're still spending at the level of students that we had projected, not what we currently have.
So I'm nervous about the declining number there, and the fear that might bring about some cutbacks.
One of the nice things, and I've spent my entire career in a declining enrollment district, it seems like, is you have a 1 year kind of relief. So you get funded in that year, the greater of that year or the prior year. And so it does give us some time. If next year we go into next year and we see we're down another 300 students at the elementary level, this is probably going to be a trend and not just a 1 year anomaly. So it does give us time to plan, because next year's funding will be based on no less than this year's students, which is kind of, I would like to have a little bit more of a cushion than 1 year, but it does give us time to plan for any reductions that would need to be made if it is a trend of less students that we think is going to happen.
So in essence, what we have in front of us is a be careful document that says, watch our spending, and here's where we're headed.
Right. Based on our assumptions.
Yeah.
At this time, yes.
All right, thank you.
Trustee Grimbo?
There is a, excuse me, there is a history to that. Our previous CBO liked to hide money, and we were criticized by the employee books when we come back with that huge amount at the end that we could have spent during the year on salaries or facilities or something else. So we were criticized quite heavily for having that much all of a sudden when we redid the books at the end of the year. So this was what was the name of the lady that came in was our CEO?
Carrie Ryland.
This is something that she started right away. As you could see that was a huge amount, that we didn't need to have that huge amount at the end of it, that we could have used some of the others. So she started that process of getting it a little bit closer to truth.
Trustee Marks?
Well, I can't say that it was actually hidden. We all saw it on the books when we'd see it, but it was still there. So disagree with you on that, Mr. Grinbo, but people wanted to assign it to different things. So I agree with you on that. But I do have a question on, so when we're looking at that fund balance trend as it's trending down, so let's just take off this year and let's say that we're next year. So if we were sitting right here, right now, next year, and we had to say we could certify this budget in 2020 and 21, and the unassigned balance is negative 8 million. I can't quite read it, but 8,420,000 $666. So if that's where we were for next year, would that mean that we would have a negative rating if we were sitting here?
So when you certify, it's in December and it's in March. So if we were to fast forward to this December,
Right.
for a first interim for 18-19,
Mhm.
we would be qualified.
Okay.
And so that's what that would
Oh,
mean. Instead of
okay.
positive, we'd be qualified.
Okay, it would
So-
mean we may not meet.
Right.
Okay, all right, may not be met. Okay, thank you. Oh, I was just trying to understand, because I know that if it trends this way, some changes are going to have to happen, and in a short amount of time, because we have to do this again in a few months. And so I just was, I mean,
Correct.
8
When
months.
when we bring a budget for you, it's either approved or not approved.
Right.
And then once you do interim reports, then that's when you get into positive, qualified, or negative. So.
Right. Anyway, so we'll call it a blinking red light. And it hasn't turned all red yet, but it's blinking. It's saying, warning, warning. Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions? All right. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Anyone? All right. Seeing none, back to the board for comments and or a motion for approval. Trustee Mark.
So I had a comment. I just wanted to thank you very much for putting the amounts in the PERS and STIRS on those lines where the percents were before. I really appreciate that, and it just helps me see the amount that's in that. So it's on B62 on, underneath. Anyway, because I was like, what is, 1.3, 2.169%. So I appreciate you putting the amount in there for us. And with that, I could move approval unless John was.
You can move.
Okay, I move approval of the
I'll second
second
it in 1
interim
second.
financial report.
All right. Trustee Walker.
And I'll just make the one comment that I think is encouraging on the board is that I think all of us are seeing red flashing lights, which I think is positive because I think we all need to be aware of what's looming in the out years that aren't up there when you look at 20, 23, 24, 25, and those PERS and STIRS numbers keep climbing. I think that's healthy that we're all watching red flashing lights. And then I will second Trustee Mark's motion.
All right. The motion for approval of the second interim financial report has been made by Trustee Mark and seconded by Trustee Walker. Are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor, say aye. 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 All those opposed? Student representative? Aye. All right. And so the motion passes unanimously. And that takes us on to item B7 and the approval of authorization to utilize CMAS contracts to purchase information technology hardware, software, supplies, and services with OHO Technology. And I turn it over to Superintendent Redquist.
Senior Director Cindy Mentor will present this item and the next two, so she'll be up for 3 items.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Board President Newman, board members, Interim Superintendent Ridquist, and Cabinet. The district is committed to providing a school environment that promotes the safety of students, employees, and visitors to school grounds and recognizes the importance of protecting district property, facilities, and equipment from vandalism and theft. 6 of the district's 8 high schools, 1 middle school, and district support sites currently have an aging security camera system using IP-based security cameras. In addition, 10 elementary schools have a small number of aging security cameras initially implemented to support the CDP programs. Overall, there's almost 600 security cameras requiring replacement. Current issues with these existing cameras and systems include limited numbers of days recording, in many cases, does not provide adequate time for site administrators to view video footage. Notifications are not always sent when cameras stop working. There's no watermark security technology when recording the videos. And most importantly, the end-of-life support was last June of 2017. So there is no longer any support for the version of the security camera system that is at these specific school sites. There are a multitude of security camera systems available in the market, place that range from supporting homes to businesses and with basic to enterprise features. Avigilon designs, develops, and manufactures video analytics, network video management software and hardware, surveillance cameras, and access control solutions. Avigilon solutions have been installed at thousands of customer services, including school campuses. And just some of the reasons why Avigilon was selected as the district standard last year. Avigilon was a global leader in security of video analytics. Avigilon follows the safety and security guideline for K-12 identified in PASS, or Partner Alliance for Safer Schools. There's no annual software fee for the video and access control, so it's basically a one-time purchase at the time. 5-year advanced replacement warranty on our servers, which is pretty much the lifetime of the servers in the district. 3 years advanced replacement warranty on the cameras, so if any camera fails within the 3 years, they basically will ship you one out and then you ship the bad one back. 24/7 direct technical support, no cost for training, and one of the more important features that I always look for in an application is that it supports single sign-on, and that is the application will use the staff's district network and email account to access the specific application. So there's no separate accounts and passwords to maintain in the application. During this past school year, 17-18, the Avigilon security camera system was implemented at both Modesto High School and Beyer High School. Modesto High School had 70 cameras installed, where Beyer had 64. The cameras are a mix of camera models so as to provide the most coverage at a school site within the approved budget. Similar security systems as the ones that we put in at Beyer and Modesto High are or will soon be installed at many other school districts close to us. Stockton Unified has more than 50 sites using the same system. Galt Unified is using it. Merced College just completed a project. Salida Unified is currently demoing and plans to implement it at 5 sites. And Escalon is currently planning to implement it at 7 sites. There are many other school districts in the Valley and Bay Area that are using Avigilon. Even San Joaquin County Office of Ed, along with our Modesto Police Department, is using Avigilon. Competitive bids must be sought or identified to meet formal bid requirements. On June 19, 2017, the board approved for 2017-18 the use of CMAS contract number 3-16-84-0022M and CMAS contract number 3-17-84-0022P contracts for approximately $2 million. The district was notified by the reseller, OHO Technology, last month, February 2018, that the CMAS contract number 3-16-84-0022M had expired and that there was a new contract, CMAS number 3-17-84-22R. So basically the M went to an R at the very end of the contract. For December, the new contract runs from December 4th, 2017 through August 31st, 2021. So in essence, the contracts that we used for Beyer and Modesto last year and finishing up this year expired at the beginning of December. At that point, the contract changed to a new number and is now extended out through 2021. So this is a contract change. California Multiple Award Schedules, or CMAS contracts, are cooperative or piggyback contracts, and the contracts meet bidding requirements and allow public agencies to achieve greater cost savings and allow for multiple public agency use. Information and Technology Services staff have determined that the CMAS contract number 3-17-84-0022R, the new one, for hardware, software, supplies, and services, and CMAS contract number 3-17-84-0022P, a second one that is still in existence that has not expired, for professional consulting services, offers the best value to the district to provide security video monitoring to replace the existing aging security camera system. Current and pending purchase requests total approximately $2.8 million. Funds are budgeted in the general fund and local control funding formula. The increase in costs are due to a small increase in equipment costs from a year ago, when budgets were actually created for the 17-18, and an increase in cost to implement replacement security cameras in optimal locations at the school site. The view from many of the existing outside cameras are blocked by trees. So you go out to Grigori or Enox, you look at where they put the cameras, which are about halfway up the outside of the building, and there's these beautiful trees that have grown right in front of the cameras. So the plan was basically, we still need cameras in those locations, we're just gonna raise them up, which does, so instead of the cost to just go in and take the camera out and put the camera in, now we have to run new cabling to basically get to that new location at the very top to reach the view that the school site requires it from that camera. In addition, there were several schools with standalone security camera systems that were not using the district's old security camera system. These cameras were not originally identified, and until the site walks in August, did not get added to the replacement list. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve authorization to utilize CMAS contracts to purchase information technology, hardware, software, and supplies and services with OHO Tech. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Minter. Does anyone have any questions for her? Trustee Walker.
I want to make sure I'm not giving the wrong answers because I had to work off of recollection from last year. Our cameras are recording live, correct?
That is correct.
Just making sure because I said we were recording live. Yes, the only other question I have came up, and I would have asked earlier had I known. I pulled last year's agenda item, and I think the question I just got to asking myself was, it wasn't 2 million. I see 500,000
Yes.
and 200,000, not 2 million. And I don't want that to be answered tonight, but I guess at some point can we square those numbers?
Oh, I can explain.
Okay, I'm listening. I pulled last year's. I'm looking at the two together.
Completely understand. The agenda from last year, the 500,000 was for Modesto and Bayer. That was the cost of putting those two camera systems in. In June, as part of that came out of the business services side of the fence when they put in their piggyback contracts. There is a long list of piggyback contracts that are approved, so that allows the district to purchase off of those contracts throughout the school year. The CMAS contracts were listed there to be used for the security camera projects that were budgeted for 17-18, which was the replacement of all of the existing security cameras, which was 2 million. Did I say 200,000?
Last year says 200,000.
In
From-
June.
From
well,
April of 2017?
No, this was in June of 2017.
I'll go find it. I just wanted to square that. I didn't have that question before you started speaking. But
No,
I'm
and
watching them going, where did 100, there was a large gap between missing 3 zeros. But I'll go look. Thank you.
Trustee Brown.
So first of all, I want to say welcome back.
Oh, thank you. Glad to be back.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. So I know there's been some questions that have arisen about the clarity of some of the images off of the cameras that we have at Bayer and at Modesto High. Is there any concern or any need to look at an upgrade on some of those cameras?
Well, there again, we put in quite a different variety of cameras. There are standard def and there are high def. And basically, we went for coverage versus high def from that when we implemented the cameras. I actually did reach out to one of the principals. I reached out to both principals and got a response back from one. Of course, the higher def cameras are much clearer. You always see clearer, even 4K cameras, you'll always see clearer. But basically, to provide the coverage that the sites were requesting, we ended up putting a large majority of cameras in as standard def. They basically are an image, unless you're trying to go a distance away, then they're going to get blurry the further you go out. So it's all about positioning the cameras in the right locations.
So what kind of price difference is there between the high def and the standard def?
I don't have the prices in front of me, but I want to say they're not quite 50% more. I'm sorry, not quite 100% more. They're more like 70, 80, but it depends on the megapixel of the actual camera. We have cameras ranging from 2 megapixel, again, which is actually the resolution of the camera the video being streamed, to I think 6, 10, 12. I think there is 1 or 2 4K cameras because they're located out maybe in a field or on a pole in a parking lot. But it's inside the interiors, and putting a standard depth versus a high def on an interior would make no difference. It just depends on where you're placing it and what you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. So do we have any documented situations where we've not been able to gather the data that we've needed because the clarity of the image wasn't good enough?
That I would have to go back and ask either maintenance and operations or check with well, at this time, Bayer and Modesto High. As I did receive an email basically that Jason Manning reported at Modesto that the system has been reliable since it was put in at the end of last year, last fall, that they've had no issues and they've been able to meet all of the needs from all of the events that have occurred at Modesto High. Like I said, I'm waiting to hear back from Dan. In fact, Mr. Manning even asked for more cameras, in positions where there aren't any. And again, we went in and put in as many as we could with the budget that we were allocated at that time.
So careful spending as we look forward, but we definitely want to make sure that we've got adequate coverage. Issues are becoming more and more critical with school safety and our, the issues that are not foreseeable, but we fear could happen. And so just want to make sure that we have adequate equipment to protect our staff and our students.
Trustee Marks?
Yes, I agree with Mr. Brown, Trustee Brown. And I'm on a Modesto Neighborhood Incorporated, and we also meet with the police department and try to ensure that crimes that are committed, the police department has the capacity to prosecute if need be, especially with robberies and harm that has been caused in neighborhoods. And their biggest issue was the resolution of the cameras, and for them, the home cameras help a lot because they can post things and say, this is the person that's, whatever crime they've committed, they can try to get them. So, and help ensure that neighborhood becomes safe. Because so I'm just hoping that what we're doing as we determine which types of cameras we have, that they're high enough resolution to be able for the police department to use, because I believe that's why we're doing this, is to make our schools safe, to be able to find those that are committing crimes in our area, and then to be able to prosecute them. So I'm just hopeful that when you determine that the little higher def is extremely helpful, because they could not, there's a whole bunch of them they couldn't use. So, but we were able to find a woman, because the high resolution got a car, the license plate on a car, and we were able to have a girl that was being, she was kidnapped in our neighborhood, and we were able to meet with the police department right away because of everybody had connections with them in that neighborhood, and they were able to find the girl in the car 45 miles away, but it was because they could see the high definition of the license plate on the car, and we were able to get her back. So it was it's those kinds of things that I think we want to ensure that our students are safe, our staff's safe, and if we need to find them, we can find them, or at least have high def so we can do that. So I appreciate all the work and that back amount of time that you've had to do to try to determine which company to decide on and how well it will work for us, and that these other districts have already done it and are using it. So that's helpful. So thank you.
Trustee West?
I heard you mention that several of our sites have cameras. Do all of our school sites have cameras?
No. Currently, all of the high schools do now, because Bayer and Modesto were the last 2 high schools to get cameras. We have 1 junior high, Hanshaw, so we have 3 junior highs that do not have any cameras. And out of the 22 elementaries, we have 12 that do not have any cameras yet.
Thank you.
Trustee Lopez?
In terms of high def cameras, do we have an estimate of sites that have high def over standard, is there less cameras that they use? Because maybe that would be a way to offset the price if we can have we have higher def quality cameras that are strategically placed, but much less for the same cost, right?
Correct. One of the things, unfortunately, because I did walk all of the school sites with maintenance and operation during the month of August, and one of the things that it became very much aware, as you all know, of the school sites, there's a lot of nooks and crannies. And, you know, every school site has a specific location where they want, you know, which is the most problem areas. But one of the things I've always said is that you'll never get 100% coverage. You know, you have to position the cameras in the best location possible, you know, and to meet the needs. And, you know, what we're trying to do here is balance that need out so that we can get cameras at all of the school sites in the most critical conditions. If we continue, if we were to continue putting in high def cameras in every location, then basically we would have a lot less coverage and not be able to meet that need to get to the last few, 15 school sites. So, you know, hopefully as we move forward, you know, the goal for me is basically focused on getting cameras in, because security is very, very important and very important for the district. And we all want to work and have our kids come to school in a very safe environment. But then look at possibly swapping them out in the more critical spots for those higher defs as we get going is always a possibility, you know, from that perspective. A lot of options. But again, you know, listening to the prior presentation, you know, with limited funds, you know, how do you get cameras to these sites? And we're not going to make it if we're putting 4K and high def cameras in every single location. It's just not, we don't have that kind of money and that kind of funds to do it. So we try to do the best we can with what we've, you know, been given, and very thankful for that.
Trustee Walker.
And just to come back, I think you've already sort of covered it, but even though we do have some cameras at sites, they all need to, where we have not replaced them, they still need to be replaced as well.
Right.
And that the idea really is coverage, and then we can always go back and tune. I think the other thing I've noticed, certainly in some neighborhoods, that MPD is doing is interesting that you mentioned they're using similar name brand cameras. And I don't remember what they called them. I should have written it down. But it's up on the light poles and the blue lights, and they flash.
I've seen those.
And they seemingly tend to be focused in parks. But fortunately, a lot of our schools are near parks. And so maybe there's the opportunity to get a bit of double coverage there. But I think the approach at this point makes a lot of sense for coverage. And I think that going back later and coming back to us, and we look at 12, 14, 16 months down the road after everything's in, then we go back and look and say, well, here's an area that we may want to do something with a higher resolution, but first and foremost, get the coverage and make sure that we've got live camera coverage on all of our sites as best we can, because you're right, having students, they will find nooks and crannies and they will hide.
Trustee Brown.
Just one last thank you for looking at ways that we can use our limited resources to get the best bang for the buck. And fortunately, this is one area where technology is improving rapidly, and many times we see cost dropping when the technology improves. So let's hope that continues. That trend allows us to do the best we can with our limited funds. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any more questions from the board? All right, I'll take it to the audience if there's any questions on this issue. Come on up to the podium.
Can you hear me from here?
No, we need to have you come up to the podium, because that way.
I have a quick question, however.
I'm going to take you the mic.
Yeah, thank you. That way it gets on the recording. It's really the microphone that matters.
Thank you.
They won't be able to see your face either, if you're okay with that, in the video.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay. I don't think.
My name is Rose Mitchell, and I just had a question regarding the schools that do not have cameras. I think there's 12 to 15 schools, perhaps you mentioned. Have there been any reports regarding crime in any of those school areas, whether it's the nooks and crannies or the parks nearby? Because that to me would be a high risk kind of thing that you would be looking at if there are crimes being reported to whomever within Modesto City Schools District that are having crime, but there are no cameras available.
All right, thank you. Is this something Ms. Minter, do you need to
I can
into that?
I can respond to what where we're going.
Okay.
I can't respond to which one has the highest crime areas. That's not in my technology arena. But our plan is to move forward next year and continue adding cameras at those 15 school sites as much as we can. M&O, maintenance and operations, and ITS have gone through, and we have prioritized. Maintenance and operation has prioritized, not me. The remaining 15 school sites, so that they know which ones need cameras the most, and those are the ones that will get the cameras when we start up next year.
Great. All right. Thank you. Are there any more questions from the audience? Thank you for your question. All right, that takes us back to the board for comments or a vote.
I make a motion to approve the authorization to utilize CMAS contracts to purchase information technology, hardware, software, supplies, and services with Ojai Technology.
All right, a motion's been made. A second. Trustee Lopez, all those in favor?
Aye.
Can you run over the next one? Can you take the next one?
Yes.
Okay, moving on to B8. Approval of authorization to utilize the school project for utility rate reduction SPUR. Master contract to purchase information technology, hardware, software, supplies, and services with AMS.net. And I believe we're coming right back to Ms. Minter.
That's correct.
Good evening again. The district currently uses Cisco Nexus 9372 core switches at school sites to manage wide area network connections between the school sites and the district data center. To support enhanced security for the district's network, a new Cisco 9500 core switch will be implemented at the Pearson Education. I'm sorry, that's an error. It will not go there. A core switch will be implemented at each of the 34 school sites. The core switches are required to move security access validation from the district's data center to the school sites. The new core switches will allow the district to implement a new technology security group tagging. Security group tagging simplifies operational management by removing design complexity, helps to increase network performance, and ensures dependable resource access. The core switches will allow information and technology services staff to provide a more efficient and less complex way to establish network security policies that allow staff and students appropriate access to district resources and minimizing the spreading of viruses. An uninterrupted power supply, or UPS, will also be implemented at each of the 34 school sites in the main administration building. The UPS will allow the administration office phones to be operational during a brief power outage at the school site. So basically, if there is a network outage between the data center and the school sites, I really said that backwards, and the power is still on at the school site, the phones still work. But if the power goes off, of course the phones are now all driven by the network and there's no power for the phones. The UPS will keep our network equipment up and running, which will in essence keep the phone calls being able to come in. Competitive bids must be sought or identified to meet formal bid requirements. The school project for utility rate reduction, or SPUR, SPURR, has established SPUR master contract number SMC-ER-028 with AMS.net for E-rate eligible products and services following a request for proposals process. SPUR is a joint process authority, or JPA, and the district is a member of SPUR. Authority for the contract is pursuant to Government Code Section 6500. Information and technology staff have determined that the SPUR master contract number SMC-ER-028 for hardware, software, supply, and services offers the best value to the district. The total estimated project cost is $1,031,144.45. If E-rate approval is received for the 2018-19 year, the district would be reimbursed for 85% of the contract cost. If E-rate is approved, the district's portion would be approximately $154,672. Funds are budgeted in the general fund and local control fund formula. So basically, for the total cost, we pay 15 cents on the dollar when it comes to the end of the day, or 15%. It is recommended that the Board of Education approve authorization to use the school project for utility rate reduction or SPUR master contract to purchase information technology, hardware, software, supply, and services with AMS.net Inc. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Right. Are there any, let's see, I'm seeing lights from Trustee Brown.
Yes, looking back at the situation that we faced in late November, early December, would this have helped us with our telephone servers at the schools?
Yes, it most definitely. Actually, the phones were only taken down a very short period throughout most of the week. The telephones did stay up. We did take them down, again, because we were being very, very cautious as we were going through that week. And I was in constant communication with staff throughout that whole time as steps were taken each day. But this just gives that extra push, extra level of support for the school sites, so that if the network connection, let's just say that the fiber breaks between the district data center, somebody runs into a telephone pole and the fiber breaks, or there's a fire in the back of a house in an alley and burns up all the fiber, which happened this past year, then the school could at least continue to use their phones if the power actually went out at that school site, just in the office. We're not providing backup battery power for every single phone at the school site, but at least the office could be able to receive a set number of calls and go out. There was a set number of calls that could go out at each elementary, junior high, and high school.
All right, Trustee Walker.
So let me get the name right. The uninterrupted power supply is literally just to the phones?
That's all we plan on using it for, correct?
Okay.
Because if we did, UPSs are pricey to begin with, and the longer you want to keep up those phones, the more batteries you have to buy, which comes at a cost. So we're looking, again, to make sure that it stays up long enough to hopefully get everything back online. Usually our outages are relatively short, but if it's a major one, at least it allows the office to send out communications. Hey, we're going down, and go into emergency protocol.
And that's particularly because we're using VoIP, right?
Exactly.
So the phones are driven by that. And the other thing you brought up, which puts me in a tricky position, is why I have concerns. Generally speaking, when we went back to November, December, and we started talking about 100% digital curriculum, which is not what we were discussing then, but it became clear very shortly thereafter that 100% digital is what we were doing. I pulled every single agenda item since January 2016, the ones I can find, were $23+ million into technology. And a house fire, or a cable going out, or any of these other different events, and here's another million, so now my 23 is 24 if we don't get reimbursed, relies on us being 100% technology driven in the classroom, and that to me is a problem. Because at the end of the day, if the books are gone and the curriculum's gone and you can't log in, then the children aren't learning. And my general perception at this point is we are leaning forward rapidly and going towards 100% digital curriculum, and that's certainly going to come back to the board at some point, so this makes me nervous. Because I think you bring up valid points. It doesn't take us doing anything wrong. But just like we lost a week to it doesn't take much to shut us down now at the classroom level. I have concerns. I don't know if it's a question of just my general nervousness and concern about being reliant on one method delivery, and this may help that, but it doesn't prevent anything other than keeping the phones up.
No. This is not just to keep the phones up. The UPSs, which are a small cost of that $1 million, they're basically about $3,500 each. So 3,500 times 34 is your UPS cost. The rest of it is a $20,000 switch, which is sitting at each of those 34 school sites. That's the majority of the cost when you add plus the software parts and all the little pieces that go to it. That's for security of the network. And I'm sorry if I misstated
No, you didn't.
that.
I get that.
But the purpose of the switches is definitely for security based. Again, what we've been doing since the event and at the end of November is looking at what other levels of security that we need to add to keep the malware and the viruses from spreading and keep them out to begin with. This is one of those several steps that we plan on taking. Another one is to implement another layer of malware software that allows us to be more proactive and to see what's going on. That was one of the things that I wanted and I did not have when it came to November. So like I said, we're looking at different areas and different things to basically, if things happen, but this is definitely security.
No, I get that. But it's also very budget eating. It's Pac-Man. It's never ending. And we were assured in November when I lost 5-1, when I was arguing not to go to a full digital sort of one-to-one device thing, that it was locked down. And we were told that it was locked down. We were told that it was closed. We were closed intranet. You couldn't get in or out of it. And within 4 days, everything's down and we're on December 4th or 5th. So my general concern is this is very expensive. It's going to continue to eat. And I appreciate the security, but the why we need it is underneath it, we're leaning towards a 100% digital curriculum thing. And if we're not, somebody please correct me, because every indicator is going in that direction.
Any other questions? All right, let's take it to the audience for any questions. Any questions from the audience? All right, back to the board for comments and approval. I have to say I don't disagree with my colleague, Trustee Walker, that this is a concern. So I guess the criticism of this agenda item is perhaps that it doesn't go far enough, because we're only going to keep the phones up, but it doesn't do anything to keep the computers running in the particularly at our high school sites, and now our middle schools. So and our middle schools are, we've been putting a lot of money into our technology and our infrastructure and our high school sites in preparation for the one-to-one. In our middle schools, we have a little bit more delayed on that. So this is a concern, but it isn't a no on this one for me. It's just maybe we need to address what Trustee Walker was saying, or at least feel out how much more is that? How much more is it what does it cost to protect it? And then what is that ongoing cost? So just so we could do a cost benefit analysis perhaps as we move forward. So my vote would be yes on this, because I think it's a step. But are there any other trustees want to comment? Trustee, our student representative.
I have a question. What is the E-rate, and if you could clarify for me, how do we know what our chances are of getting approved? Because 150,000 is significantly different from 1 million.
Yes, there's a big difference there. E-rate is a federal funding program that was started, back in 1990, 91, and it's based on your free and reduced count in the schools. And in Modesto City Schools, our free and reduced for the last many years, I want to say it's been about 70%, but this year, unfortunately, it jumped to 80%, which the free and reduced percentage drives how much percentage you get off and additional funds the federal government will pay. It's basically, look up USAC, USAC, and that will basically give you everything to know about E-rate. And it's a funding that has two different categories. One is that it originally started out paying for phone service for schools, and then it branched off through the years to internet service. And then over the last 15 to 20 years, it's branched off into the physical network equipment. We did an E-rate project a couple years ago, same thing, except we were at an 80%, and this year we just jumped to 85% of a discount. The probability is that our last E-rate project that we're doing right now at the high schools, we're putting in Wi-Fi. APs in the high school cafeterias, in the quad areas outside, and in the gym, so that teachers can basically use wireless devices in the gym. That was all funded, and the district paid 20 cents on the dollar for that project, and it was approved. We've been told if there is plenty of money for everything that's been submitted. Everything that was submitted last year was approved if it met the basic requirements, and they expect the same thing this year. So if you apply, you have a 99.99% chance of receiving those funds.
Thank you. Great question. Trustee Walker?
I think what would go back to what you were saying before the last comment, what would settle my mind a bit, and me and you have briefly talked about this, is that if we're not going with a 100% digital technology, so when it goes down, we're not out of business. And I think if we're looking at a hybrid system where there is a backup in place that says that if the computers go down, there is still a textbook in the classroom and things can proceed, is the piece that would give me peace of mind. I'm not convinced that's what we're doing. It'll come back at some point to the board on the other curriculum choice. But I think that's what would give me peace, in the sense of saying, instead of buying another $1 million or $2 million or how many ever, whatever technology costs, protections, is it say if it goes down, that there is a backup in place and we're not solely reliant on technology. I don't have a problem with technology. A tool, not the tool. And I guess that's the thing I keep getting hammered in, is I worry about this because I know when our networks go down at work, I'm offline. It can be as simple as HVAC repair. We do HVAC repair, they come in, do air conditioning, servers have to go down, I can't log in, nothing can happen, something goes wrong with that repair, we're out of business. That's different if I'm out of business and can't write software versus 15,000 students or whatever that may be. I don't know how viable a solution that is, but to me, that would be the backup I would be looking for, something that puts something in the students' hands that lets them keep moving forward versus being out of business for 1, 2, 3 weeks or whatever it may be.
Trustee Brown?
I can't agree with you more, John, but I'm going to go forward and recommend that we approve this item on the agenda tonight. But I think that we do need to pursue your concern.
Is there a second? It's all right. You want to second it, Trustee West is seconding the motion. All right. All those in favor state aye and raise your hand. Aye. All right. Are those opposed? And our student representative.
I'll abstain. I'm not going yes or no, but I don't like this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion passes with 1 abstention and 1 no vote for our student representative. That takes us on to the last item on the agenda, the item B9, report on district technology. And Mr. Redquist, turn it over to Ms. Minter again.
One more time. Okay, report on district technology. Over the last several months, 2 technology events have occurred. The first event occurred on the evening of Monday, November 27, 2017, when the district's network servers were infected with a malware virus. The second event was on Thursday, January 4, 2018, when HP released a safety announcement pertaining to a voluntary battery recall on specific models of HP devices. As for the malware virus, early Tuesday morning, November 28, 2017, district staff became aware that a malware virus had infected district servers the evening prior. The virus was later identified by Microsoft as a variant of the ransom Win32 Crippen virus. To ensure that the virus did not spread, the district's network connections were disconnected at all schools and support sites sometime around noon on Tuesday, November 28th. During the network outage, staff and students were unable to use district devices to access the internet and district resources. Depending upon the site, the network outage lasted between 2 to 2.5 days. Network and computer technicians worked approximately 56.5 hours of overtime during the recovery process to recover data backups for district servers and verify that all staff devices were unaffected by the virus. Although classes were held each day, teacher planning was affected due to the need to shift directions so as to conduct instruction without the use of district devices and online resources. Although the use of technology has many advantages, such as faster student feedback, access to current information, and etc.,
When there is a loss of network connectivity due to a virus or network equipment failure, or loss of electrical power to a site due to vehicle accidents, fire, vandalism, power equipment failure, etc., teachers must utilize alternative instructional methods. Due to the virus, there was a 3-night loss of digital homework time for high school students. In addition, there was a 2.5 day loss for the use of devices and access to digital curriculum. Teachers provided non-digital instruction during the 2.5 days. As for the HP battery recall, on January 4th, 2018, HP issued a voluntary safety recall for certain notebooks and workstation batteries. The district is currently using only one of the HP devices on the list, with almost all of these devices being used in the future one-to-one program at our high schools. All devices within the stated serial number range on the HP safety announcement were required to be tested, as HP provided only device serial numbers, not battery serial numbers, which created a very difficult time for us. Not all devices within the designated serial range had the affected battery. So basically they said, HP gave us a list of, here's the models, and oh, by the way, in each model, here's the range, but oh, by the way, only a few of these in this range are going to be affected. But they couldn't tell us which ones. It was just somewhere in there may or may not be bad batteries. So that's what we were facing. Although the district has approximately 20,000 HP X360 310G2 devices, which was the one device on the list, only a little over 100 devices were found to be affected and required a battery replacement. Students with affected devices were sent to the site's tech room to obtain a replacement battery. I'll also add that all 100 machines are currently at the HP certified partners as I speak, awaiting a shipment from HP for the replacement battery. So we have 100 of our machines off-site at that end waiting. Computer technicians use 34 hours of overtime to manually test HP X360's devices not currently assigned to a student, because again, this announcement came during winter break. The students were at home with their devices, and what we did is started checking all of the ones that we have in stock and use as spares for when the students come into the tech room. We also started checking those at Elliott and special ed programs, because at Elliott and special ed, all of their devices are not taken home and they're in carts. As the majority of the devices were assigned to students during the week of Tuesday, January 16th through Friday, January 19th, 2018, students were requested to turn on their devices at school so that a district software program could run automatically, as HP did not provide us any tool that we could use to automatically check the devices. The only tools that HP provided us was an actual program that manually only you had to touch every single machine. So we got creative and started creating our own, which is what we pushed out. The program checked against the HP website to determine whether the device is battery required replacement or not. Unfortunately, the HP website continued to go down during the week due to a high consumer demand accessing the HP website. So again, to check the battery, you had to go out to HP's website and have that device talk to HP's website. When so many people around the United States and around the world started hitting the HP website, it kept crashing because they did not plan for how many people wanted to check their batteries. Thus created more of a problem as the days went by during that first week, because we weren't getting the results that we had expected to get the first day. The HP website had to be up, just to complete the battery check. High school students were also advised to keep their devices off while at home and to use extreme caution while charging the device. And again, Becky Fortuna put out a great deal of messages on a regular basis regarding this specific battery recall. More specifically, to not leave the device unattended while charging or to charge overnight. So again, watch your device. This created a catch-22 scenario, as the device had to be charged so it could be powered on while on the school network, so as to receive the district software program, which would check the device's battery against the HP website. During the first week of school after winter break, staff and teachers continued to access the district's network with their district devices. So basically, while they were in school, they had full access of the devices to use for curriculum and instructional purposes. Teacher devices were not affected at all throughout the entire process. Due to the HP battery recall, there was a 3-night loss of digital homework time for high school students. In addition, there was a 4-day loss of the use of devices and digital curriculum by high school students. Teacher accessed the
district network with their district devices and provided instructions during the 4 days. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Minter? Trustee Walker?
I'll say thank you. I only requested this 2 months ago and it came back very quick. Thank you, sir. Cost of doing business. I think we covered a lot of this in the previous agenda item. The one thing I'll say about the battery recall, and I have a student here that may or may not be able to confirm this, it wasn't 3 or 4 days. It was more like 2.5, 3 weeks. It just was. My daughters were still horsing around, and part of that was because teenagers don't listen well at times. It's in their nature. But the other problem was they were having to go to the tech center or the ASB, or they had to go somewhere on campus to go stand in line to get it checked, which strung it out. But it's the cost of doing business, and I've already stated in the previous agenda item, there's got to be a better way or something in between. But it was a long time. And when we finally did get around to testing it 2.5 weeks in, when Dad finally got through screaming and everybody was actually listening to me, we were trying to follow the instructions, and again, it was tricky, and we ended up getting another high school friend on the phone to get through. It's the cost of doing business and the risk of doing it this way, and I appreciate the report.
Trustee Brown?
I want to thank the IT team for all their efforts on both of these situations, and also want to extend gratitude to the teachers and the administrators that had to put up with this, and for the skills, talents, and creativity that's required to jump out of your prepared presentation and have to use something other than the computer equipment. So thank you to all of them for the effort that allowed our students to keep learning. And I do have one other question. With this process, communication with the board was as difficult as it was for communication between the school sites and the students and everyone else. We didn't hear much information. So in the future, just want to put out there, we need updates other than through emails at a time like that. And just we are the link to the community, and a lot of people are asking us questions. And in that process, I received questions from some local vendors who were willing to help with the process. I'm just curious. You know, I relayed that information the best I could back to the district. Were we able to call on help from any of our local companies who offered their assistance?
It wasn't that we didn't. It wasn't that we didn't want to call. We didn't need to. So we had, once we identified what the issue was, we went into a specific step-by-step process, which was, of course, isolating it. And in retrospect, we probably didn't have to isolate it as much, but we didn't know where it was, and we didn't have the appropriate programs to basically tell us where it came in. So we did not know if it came in at a school and hit the servers, or if it came in through the servers. And still to this day, we don't know, which is one of the things we're working to improve upon and get that tool that will allow us, hopefully this will never happen again, but if it were. But we basically knew exactly what we needed to do, and we went through each step. It was a take your backups and restore one by one by one, and that's basically what our network techs did for each of those days, is restore all the data that had been backed up from the Sunday night's backup and put everything back together. Because again, you know, a lot of this that we've talked about is curriculum, but we also have business and student information systems that are very, very critical and have an enormous amount of data that needs to be protected. And we depend upon those backups that we made, and we depend upon the network security to keep those systems safe too. So, you know, we're looking at the whole gamut across the board, you know, when we're talking about security.
Thank you. Just to call out, you know, we rely on collaboration. We rely on the community, and the community has a lot of interest vested in what we do as a school district. So anything that we can do to reach out and collaborate with local professionals in a time of crisis, I think is very important.
Yeah.
So
I will share that
yes.
afterwards, There was other school districts that immediately contacted us because I was getting emails while I was off, getting emails that I was responding back to basically, how did it come in? What did it hit? Because the network engineers and network techs at all the other local school districts were in updating their virus protection because Microsoft just released their update based on what we had encountered. So, and then of course another local entity, one of the cities or counties also was hit almost not very long afterwards too. But there was a hole somewhere.
Yep. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions? All right, any questions from the audience? All right, seeing none, this is a report only. So unless there's comments from the board, we aren't going to take a vote. Are there any comments? Additional comments? All right, that takes us on to the last two items on the agenda. And that is item B10. I'm looking for lights. Reported meetings attended. Trustee Walker.
I was everywhere. 2/25, February 21st, I was at the WASC meeting at Elliott. And it was a Sunday afternoon. I think anytime I'm over at Elliott is good. I was meeting with the principal, the vice principal. Ms. Mack was there. Superintendent Rehnquist was there. Phenomenal site. I think it left me with a couple of questions I'll ask Mr. Albritton at some point about construction of a ag barn, welding barn behind it. Will that be completed? I think one of the conversation pieces that I walk away with is if you're bashing on Elliott, then you've essentially said Trustee Walker isn't listening to you anymore. Because the staff over there works as hard as anybody and the students are working. It's not something you bash on, it's a safety net, and they do a phenomenal job. March 1st, I went to a school site council safety committee meeting at Enox, which allowed me to listen to principal, vice principal, security, students, parents. That was some very interesting insights, which I've passed on, of one of the observations on one of the students that I thought was important as far as safety. I also did a MPD town hall meeting over by Davis, and community members came up to me asking issues about school safety, and also gave me a chance to personally thank MPD for the work that they do with us and our security staff to keep our students safe. And then the highlight was going out with Mr. Albritton, and we toured Enox Ag Barn. Phenomenal. Because we build stuff, right? And you think they built this building, and they did. But it wasn't finished because the kids are building it and making it better. And you get to see them out there, and they're working on sloping the ground. They're welding in the wall unit where they're going to tie up the cows to wash them, and they're putting that together. And you listen to a high school student say, he's going to tie this thing down, and this I-beam's going to connect this. And then we went over to Johansson where we were supposed to go somewhere else, but there was so much going on at Johansson, we never left. We saw the culinary program. We saw the welding program where I got a gift. I brought my gifts with me. So, handmade by the young lady who met me and Mr. Albritton at the door, pretty much conducted the tour. The teacher was teaching, she was touring us. I think we were 2 steps in and we got safety glasses because we have to have our safety glasses on. We saw culinary, we saw woodworking, computer programming, see if I can dig myself out of the non-tech bench here, was that, and it's very similar with the WASP meeting at Elliott. They're not in the classroom necessarily using these devices we bought. They're using big monitors and towers under the desks. And we saw them writing computer software, building computer games, using video editing software that I own at home that I use, but they were folding it in. You want to see engaged students? Those students are engaged. I think the highlight comment that sort of ties together the WASC event at Elliott and visiting the Ag Barn at Enox was that instructor talking about how do I get those G320 students out here so that when they're moving through in their 5th year or whatever it may be, that they're picking up that vocational training that will get them a job out in the community. And engaged, phenomenal. I will do the rest of them because we didn't get to see 3 other things because there was so much going on at Johansson. But fired up kids, engaged, well worth the time.
Anyone else? Trustee Brown.
Okay, just really quick. Trustee Lopez and I were at the LCR Cesar Chavez luncheon. The ASC, SB, the County School Boards Association, we toured the Family Justice Center, and I would recommend that if there's folks from the district that would like to see what happens for some of our students who are at greatest risk, they're welcoming groups from the district to come and tour and find out how we can cooperate with them with these kids in crisis. And last but not least, Shrek the Musical on Friday night over at Downey. And a lot of fun to see the talent and the opportunities that our kids have to perform. So thanks to those that put that on.
Great. Anyone else? All right, then that takes us on to the item B11, items to be placed on future Board of Education agendas.
I have one.
Trustee Walker.
CSBA put out a sample board resolution on school safety that I thought was well done. So I grabbed it, downloaded it, and
I will second that because I saw the proposal as well. So if you want to add my name to that, I think that it's worth us doing. So we'll try and put that on one of the next agendas so we can join with our colleagues in other districts in supporting this resolution. All right. Trustee Brown.
Just a quick question. I don't see the page that we've had in previous months about board proposed agenda items. Is it? I know, but I don't see the page that listed the.
What he's
the
talking
ones that
about
are-
is I call it the queue. When
Yeah.
things are waiting in the queue, like when you
Yeah.
push stuff to the printer. I didn't see it either.
You're
so-
talking about what's in the pipeline
Yeah.
like,
Yes,
for the year. We just got it compiled by Antoinette. We wait for departments to get us their finalized versions. We just have it all together, and it will be in the next board info.
Great
So-
point. Thank you.
The items that the board has requested is what I'm looking for. There was a pretty
Oh.
good list of.
Oh, I see. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I'll
I just
look
want to
into
make sure
that.
that didn't get
It
lost.
has the red on it. Like
Right.
This will be coming in
It's
September.
the agenda items that were, yes.
So
I
maybe
know
it's
what
in
you're
the
talking about
packet and
now.
I haven't found it, but I didn't see it.
I believe it's not in there. We'll make sure it's in there next time.
Yes.
So
Thank you.
Apologize for
we'll
that.
double check that.
All right, Trustee Marks.
I didn't fill this out, but I'll be happy to. But I wanted to find out if you could send us a memo about the transportation. I know you've kept us a little abreast of it, or send us an email. And then also the student, Crosby Bryant student, if you could help us know maybe at some point information on that and how that happened, or what we can do to ensure all our students have the opportunity to.
We can check into the facts and respond back.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Trustee Grenbo.
I think Brad back there met with the family and the young lady while we were breaking, so there has been something done already.
I'd still like to know what happened and how we're responding to it. How's that?
And any further discussion on that, given that the student's identity was revealed, we should not have here. But we will follow up with that in a more confidential manner. So we will take that. Thank you so much. So anything else for more items on the agenda? For future items on agenda? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. It's been moved by Trustee Walker and seconded by Trustee Grendo. We are adjourned. I know she